This is the Picard podcast on TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about episode 2 of Star Trek Picard, Penance. Welcome back, fellow Trekkies, to our second episode of the second season of Star Trek Picard, entitled Penance. Yes, I am one of your hosts, John.
I'm one of your other hosts, Derek.
And rounding out this trio, boldly going where no one has gone before, but everyone has gone there a couple of times, I am Chris.
It depends what going where means and what that entails.
Or when.
Or when. Exactly. Timey-wimey is certainly on the cards in episode 2, Penance. Yes. What are we thinking so far for this?
Oh, I'm going to spoil my thoughts. I love this episode. This is excellent. This is exactly what I wanted.
Yeah.
A really quick explanation for the big cliffhanger that we had at the end of last week as to where Picard is, or when he is, or what's going on. So, really like that. That's a great kickoff to this.
Definitely. And I do think we got an answer to our musings and our questions last week about whether this was the mirror universe. But I think that it's quite clear here. It is the same reality, but it is with a disruption there from or by the hands of Q. And so it is a disrupted reality of their timeline.
Well, let's not go too far into that, because that may be one of our points.
Well, let's hope not.
Go into the
Indeed,
episode.
But let's...
Chris, what about yourself? What do you think overall?
Overall, the episode itself is fantastic. I am going to save my thoughts because, unfortunately, I'm like, oh, that we're doing that story. Because to say that within Star Trek, we must go back in time to save the future has been done across sci-fi. It has been done a few times.
It's a big Star Trek thing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers, if you haven't listened to the podcast, or if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, you can subscribe to the podcast over on tvpodcastindustries.com, or you can find us on any good or villainous podcast catcher by looking for TV Podcast Industries.
Yes, but on Chris's big downer, let us get into our spoiler-filled review. Yes, Derek, what are some of the episode details for this episode 2 of Star Trek Picard?
Lots of writers on this one, and I think there's a reason for that. I'm sure we'll get into that in the points. The teleplay for this episode was written by Akiva Goldsman and Terry Matalas, along with Christopher Monfette. Akiva and Terry wrote episode 1, and Christopher Monfette, this is his first episode of Star Trek Picard. He has written episodes of 911 and 12 Monkeys, the TV show as well, which are both very big shows. The story itself was written by Akiva Goldsman, Terry Matalas, Christopher Monfette, and showrunner, or one of the 4 showrunners, Michael Chabon as well. The episode was directed by Doug Aarniokoski, who directed episode 1. We spoke about the other credits that he had in the past before then. But John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for Star Trek Picard, Season 2, Episode 2, Penance?
Sure. Having been jumped by the entity Q to an alternate timeline, the highly decorated General Picard of the Confederation must prepare for Eradication Day, while he tries to understand his new predicament and get answers on the whereabouts of the rest of his team. At the Confederation's headquarters, confronted with the last Borg Queen who is to be eradicated, the president of the Confederation's 7 of 9, along with Picard, Elnor, Rafi, Rios and Dr Juratti, realise they must save the Borg Queen so they can go back in time to correct the nightmare of humanity's disrupted reality.
Uneasy alliances and time travel. That sounds like Star Trek to me.
It certainly does.
Excellent. If you didn't hear our episode 1 podcast, I'll quickly run through how we talk about our Star Trek episodes. In the Federation, Star Trek is made up of directives and general orders in our Picard podcast. We're going to choose 3 top moments. Our biggest moment is our prime directive, medium moment is our omega directive, and our other moment to discuss is a general order. We start off with our general order each week.
I guess if we were in the Confederation, our points would be kill them, kill them, kill them, I guess.
Yes, eradicate that
Kill
species.
them
Or
all.
eradicate, yes.
Exterminate. No, sorry, that's Doctor Who.
That's
Yes.
Doctor Who, exactly.
Let's not cross our streams.
That's Ghostbusters.
But with that, let's get on to our general order, our minor point from the episode.
Make it so, number 1.
Derek, do you want to kick us off?
I can, absolutely. I just wanted to make reference because you kind of mentioned it there. We talked on last week's episode about whether this is a mirror universe or whether this is a changed world, effectively. So very clear here that the mirror universe in Star Trek is a universe which is exactly opposite to the universe that we spend most of our time in. In here, it's very clear from Q that this is a changed universe. There's one point in time that's been changed and has led to the universe that we have right now. So this is much more along a pretty standard concept of like what if in the Marvel universe. It's along that concept rather than the mirror universe. In fact, in all the mirror universe episodes, they don't go there to change it back to their world. They go there, try to survive so they can get back to their universe. So quite a big difference in the sci-fi concepts there. But we do get a reference from Q to a number of mirror universe episodes. He initially says to Picard, "Oh, that's so very yesterday's Enterprise of you, Jean-Luc." And then he also references Through a Mirror Darkly, which is also a mirror universe episode from the Enterprise show, from Star Trek Enterprise. So that's quite interesting that he's referencing the mirror universe episodes, even though this isn't a mirror universe. I just thought that was quite fun.
He's actually a fan of Star Trek, so he actually is in another universe just watching the episodes. And just like, he's such a Trekkie, he's just quoting the episode titles.
Entirely possible. Remember, every possibility exists in the multiverse, Chris. So it's entirely possible that Q could be a Trekkie or Trekker in one of his universes.
Well, that's it. And it is definitely, it's not the mirror universe. As Q says, it's the same day, same time, different harvest. Exactly. It is that this is the Jean-Luc Picard or General Picard that would have been born out of this change in the direction of humanity at some point in the past.
Yeah.
So everything we see here is what Picard would have done in this universe. It's not, even though it is totally against Picard's morals, in terms of the alien slaves and everything to do with his personality and his principles. It's definitely a disrupted timeline.
Yeah, so I guess we may get into it throughout the season as it goes on as to whether Picard is the way he is because of nature or nurture, I guess. So you would guess from what's happened here that Picard is the way he is because of nurture, because he's growing up in this universe the way it is. Yeah. So he's become this completely different person than he is in our regular Star Trek universe.
Definitely. And of course, yeah, and the episode's Penance, and we hear Q saying about atonement, and it's forgiveness for what, ultimately? So, I mean, this point in time that has changed the reality that they live in, it'll be interesting to get to that, I guess, nexus point, to borrow from another world.
Another property.
Well, also from Star Trek, because there is the Nexus in Star Trek as well.
That is true.
One other thing from Q as well, he does mention this isn't a test. We talked about it last week that Q normally is testing Picard and testing humanity. This time he's saying this is not a test. This is not a lesson. This is penance for what you've done, effectively. So a very different kind of attitude from Q here. One final point from me on this. One final little note on this from the Mirror Universe piece. I didn't realize until today, I've seen so many Star Trek shows, lots going on at the same time, but I didn't realize until today that there was never a Mirror Universe episode of The Next Generation. There's been loads of comics, which is what I've seen versions of the characters in the Mirror Universe from Star Trek Next Generation, but all of the Mirror Universe episodes were in DS9, were in Discovery, were in the original Star Trek, were in Enterprise. I don't even think Voyager had any Mirror Universe episodes, but I just think it was really surprising to me, because I always thought there was at least one Mirror Universe episode in each of the shows. So so interesting. There you go. Chris, do you want to take us on with your minor point, your general order?
Yeah, I'll just jump in. It's also on Q, and just the question mark of, is Q sick? So Picard starts this question to a degree later on in the episode. I actually would mirror that exact same thought, in that some of the explanation that we got from Q at the beginning, I was struggling to follow. It was more Q-ish than standard Q.
Okay.
Like, the penance aspect, I didn't understand that. I still thought, okay, it's a test, but they failed part one of the test already, whatever that was, and this is your essentially your detention homework till your next test, or kind of like the kind of the repercussions while we continue testing.
Okay.
Q seems off. Q does seem, and again, this is a fantastic part of this character, is he was always Shakespearean, and he plays off that Earl Grey English Picard, i.e. this kind of distinguished gentleman approach. So then you have this Macbethian Shakespearean foil to the character that is Picard. I found.
Okay.
Like, it's always just been kind of, to a degree, over the top. The Judge episode, where he's literally dressed in massive judge robes and, like, presiding over a court.
Yeah.
He seems short, angered, direct, and that didn't see kind of, and initially it just was also jumbled. So I'm now going, okay, this is interesting. This is what is happening here? Is Q dying? And he's like, do you know what? I've tested you enough, and now you still failed, and this is your penance. But it's that question mark is still. So it was something I'm like, okay, well, what? It raises more questions, and then when Picard kind of mentioned that Q is off, he felt different or sick.
Yeah.
I was like, interesting. Okay, so it was supposed to be like that.
Yeah. Like it feels very much that this will be as much about Q as it will be about Picard in terms of this. I know it's not a test as such, but this situation, and why it's being undertaken. And again, it will come back to that nexus point, really, or that change point.
Because there always has been something about Q that he can be seen as very childlike. He seems to just pop into a situation and play a game with Picard, putting everybody's lives on the line is effectively what seems to happen. And I love the interaction between these two actors.
Yeah.
We have Jean-Luc saying to Q, I've had enough of your bullshit, and then he gets slapped across the face from Q, and Picard's going, just cut to the chase. And there's a fantastically delivered line from John Delancey where he's going, the chase is cut, bleeding, dying in your arms, and I'm but a suture in this world. I'm just here to stem the flow, effectively. That's it. So he's telling him it's not a test. He's telling him it's not a situation that Q is putting them in. This is a real situation, and he can't stop it. He's not there to stop it, and he's not there to test Picard. So very different situation than we've seen before with Q. So really interesting, really exciting to see where that's going to go in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
And John Delancey really does chew the scenery.
So
he
good.
does.
But in such a magnificent way.
Yeah.
Because when he slaps him, that's like, I was like,
You
kind
Patrick
of like,
Stewart.
like
Sir Patrick Stewart.
Sir Patrick Stewart may not survive that slap.
Yeah.
Well,
Good job it wasn't with an armor-plated glove.
Hello. But yeah, no, it was definitely different.
yeah, but you're right. The kind of scenery chewing that John Delancey does is that he works really well with the other actor in his scene. A lot of times with scenery chewing, you've seen it with Jack Nicholson and Batman is probably the best example of that. He walks on screen and nobody can survive those scenes. It's like you're just focused on that actor in that scene. Whereas with John Delancey, he is also allowing Patrick Stewart to have big moments in those scenes. But he's great to watch. Really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, but that was my minor point. Mr. Harrison, over to you. What is your minor point for this episode?
It's in the same part of the episode, and I have to say, just that opening part between these two actors in Chateau Picard before the opening credits, I just absolutely loved. It was so exciting just brilliant. But mine's just General Picard's trophies. You know, here General Picard is ruthless. He is a conqueror throughout the galaxy, and he has very much blood on his hands. And we see this with the trophies. You know, initially it's that he has alien slaves working in the kitchens. Again, flashing back to, I guess, a different time of Confederation. And then we see all the different weaponries that he's taken from his conquests. We see the Shakvak blades. We see all the different disruptors as well.
Yep.
But then when we move into the study, we see this gruesome display of different alien species, their skulls, on stands, and, you know, the trophies of his conquests, like, the hunters on the savannah with the animal heads mounted to the wall. This is absolutely the anathema of what Captain Picard would do. We see not only alien species, I'm sure there's a human skull in there, as well as the human skull that has the Borg implant. I was wondering whether that might be Huey, in some way, which would be really, really, fairly sick of General Picard to do that. But
it's entirely possible, because he would have had, a really quick connection with Hugh. He would have seen Hugh, I suppose, at some point in his experience. Like, you know, I know you're going to talk about the rest of the heads, but they are all very important moments in the history of Star Trek, these heads that are there. So Hugh of Borg would be a very important Borg. Entirely possible that that's who was taken.
And who is the human head, or human skull that is there?
Is it Riker?
It could well be.
Or did Will possibly give too much guff to Colonel Picard at some point?
It could be.
Diana Troy.
She's not
she's not a human.
No, she
looks human.
Well, that's true. So it could be an alien species. It might not be totally human. Who knows? It could just be very similar. But we have General Martok, a Klingon. And there is Galdekot, one of the Cardassians. But I guess most importantly, there is Sarek, the Vulcan, Spock's father, who he, you know, kills on the steps of the big Vulcan Science Academy. So
in front of his wife Amanda and his son Spock is what Picard is told. So
like this is all fairly just gruesome. Yes, exactly.
Well, absolutely. And I suppose to the character of Picard, he is a character known for his diplomacy. That's been central to his character. That's why he's so different from Kirk of original Star Trek. He's the person that goes in and talks and sorts out the issues. It may take a much longer time, but the issue is resolved. With someone like Gul Dukat, who was central to the Bajoran War, which is the fundamental basis of Deep Space Nine. Gul Dukat was the leader of the Cardassians for that whole period, that 7-year period that show ran and that battle raged on. So did Picard just go, screw this diplomacy and take Gul Dukat's head? And that's the end of the war. So
his diplomacy is at the end of a phaser, and you know, the barrel of a phaser, if phasers indeed have a barrel. I guess not, but even with these, you know, as they're moving through the Chateau Picard, we have nods to both Laris and Chabon that have been killed in the Romulan uprising. Outside of the gates of Romulus. They were part of the Resistance.
A complete flip on their origin story that we saw last season of how they came to work with Picard and how he rescued them effectively before they were killed. So
And finally, I guess for my point, it's that instead of the Enterprise, it is the CSS World Raiser. So a very different name and intonation to what that spaceship does ultimately.
It sounds quite like the Death Star, the World Raiser, doesn't it?
Does like a bit, doesn't it?
Destroy planets with this ship. Yeah, I thought this was so interesting. This idea of what Picard would be in this universe. How many major conflicts he would have avoided. But the whole point of the Federation in our current version of Star Trek is that they bring in other communities, bring in other worlds together. And here with Picard, you hear his speech saying, a safe galaxy is a human galaxy. And effectively, he's taken out General Bartok, who was the leader of the Klingons. He's taken out the leader of the Cardassians. He's taken out the leader of the Vulcans. The Romulans, where Uprising was destroyed. So effectively, under the boot of Picard, the human Confederation has taken out all of their major enemies and are about to take out the Borg. So, yeah, really interesting.
Although they are still fighting a front in Vulcan. We do see that with Rios. So,
yes.
And there is resistance on Earth as well. We get mention of that in Okinawa. So it's not all plain sailing for the Confederation. They have their, the resistance cells against them and their enemies given what they've done. So,
exactly.
I just thought really good. And just overall, that first bit was just phenomenal. Loved it.
Excellent.
I do think this is the one where I wish we had X-ray. Even though it is a Paramount Plus, so we won't get it. It's only just on Prime Video over here.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the one where it's like, you'd want the trivia. Like, we're in the scene, because I don't think they'll do that. Well, maybe they will with this season, but last season we didn't get much behind the scenes activities or kind of behind the scenes social media. But you'd want a tour or like a 2-minute, 3-minute video of just like, for those of you who are wondering, this is this.
Yeah.
And we spent a lot of time and we decided, like, the picture of the World Raiser, the painting. I'm pretty sure there is like little Easter eggs in each of those ships that it was firing on.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of like, and now we just have to wait for some basically well-meaning Trekkies to do like a Den of Geek on it and kind of go through.
Well, I'll give you some great news, Chris. Once again, Will Wheaton is coming back with his after show, his Star Trek after show that comes out the day after that it's released on Prime Video and Paramount Plus, where he interviews the cast and has some background on each of the episodes. So, that's where you're going to get your background. And I hope there's a walk through that set. Because you're absolutely right. That wall of weapons, is so interesting. I'd love to see what each one of those are. Also, just that one thing that is also a reference to Picard's ready room. He always had some statues in his ready room of memories from the past, of the ships that he served on, that kind of stuff. I think there was some, if I remember right, there was some Klingon weaponry in that room that he was given by the Klingons, but here he's turned that into his trophy room. So, that's another little tie back, I suppose, to, the fact that Picard does collect trophies. Kind of like Dexter in this case, though.
Yes. Okay, let us move on to our medium moment, or our Omega Directive.
Implement the Omega Directive immediately.
Chris, what is your Omega Directive?
Yeah, it's a very pretty kind of simple one for me. It's President Annika of the Confederation. So 7, essentially. I love this kind of, this moment where she wakes up and she's like, what's going on? And then she very much methodically, like a computer, runs through a test.
Love it.
Of cognitive test. Like, am I awake? Okay, what's here? Pain receptors. Nope, this is real. Like, as you would if a machinery was broken, you run a quick test, diagnostics.
It's her boot up diagnostics.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I thought it was just absolutely hilarious. Finding out then that she is, her parents never left the planet. So, she became the president of the Confederation. And, additionally, she, is married.
Yes.
Which is different as well. So you're just kind of all these little differences. You're like, interesting. They made some very interesting choices. And it's called out later. Yeah. Which I thought was hilarious. Your husband?
Yeah. I love Rafi's reaction to the whole situation, in fact, is hilarious. You know, she's told that Annika's president, and she's like, oh, she's going to wear that one well, isn't she?
Exactly.
And as she walks in, yes, you're married to him?
Also, him is a fun part as well. It's like this tiny, short man, and you're like, interesting. They why that? Literally, I'm assuming it's for that diabolical smile at the end of the episode. He was just chosen for his sneer.
Yeah, possibly,
at the end. Because otherwise I was like, I don't get it. It's Jerry Ryan. You could have got someone slightly taller. Just slightly. Just like on par. Not saying above. Just on par. This guy is like, she is looking down on him.
Yeah. I have to say though, I think Michelle Hurd's delivery when she is informed that 7 of 9 is married, where she goes, "Say what now?" And it's completely off screen.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just coming in, and it is just the best reaction in this episode. Really, really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And yes, you're right. There's no moment that she's been Borg before, so so that the reaction from Annika when she's looking in the mirror, going, "Okay, I don't have those implants." Again, she was taken very young into the Borg. She was captured as a child and has spent all of her life as a Borg up until the point she was saved by Captain Janeway. So it is kind of interesting that she's going through those processes that she would go through every single morning for the previous 20 or 30 years at this stage, so so really, really like that about her. But yes, it's kind of odd coming into episodes like this where it's almost the Quantum Leap situation. You guys remember Quantum Leap starring Scott Bakula, who was
which is being rebooted, by the way.
Yes, yeah, apparently. We'll see. Can't correct that. But you remember Quantum Leap, the whole concept of it is the characters jump into a situation and have to find out who they are. So you actually don't get any context of who they were before the character jumps in until it gets told to you. So same situation here. In this world, you have Annika in the body of the president of this world, but you don't know what kind of president she was in the past. I guess pretty brutal, but it is interesting trying to see her fill the shoes and trying to get that aggression that she thinks or guesses that the president would have, especially with her husband. I thought that was quite fun, where she does that great moment with him where she goes, "No, you tell me why today is important, and I'll decide whether you live or die." It's like, what a brilliant way to do it. That's great.
But yeah, so that's very much my point for medium point, I should say. Johnners, let's move over to your point for this.
Yeah, I think my medium moment is similar to yours. It's just seeing the reintroduction of Colonel Rios, because whatever about waking up in bed and slowly going through the diagnostic process of whether they're sentient, they can feel, they can smell, they can taste. Colonel Rios is chucked into the middle of a battle in space around Vulcan. And here we see that there is still Vulcan resistance. He's on the Vulcan front and he's having to process this whilst being fired at. And I just really kind of enjoyed this. We get just first of all, few explosions. Always like that when you have a space battle. It is that he is the leader here in, I guess, the CSS Serena. I suspect it's not Serena, but
probably something much more.
He is Colonel Rios. Yeah, exactly. Much more aggressive. He's Colonel Rios. He's put the strategy in place to deal with the Vulcans, the resistance, and his victory is a bait and switch. Now we don't get any more than that, but he's using the same kind of strategies as we saw in season 1 on his bait and switch approach to tactical warcraft. So really like this. I like the interaction with 7 of 9 as she asks for a private, secure line to him, and just that figuring out through very sort of disguised speech about, is it you, Rios? Yeah. Is it you, 7? I like that moment, the subterfuge of it, and ultimately recalled back to Earth, so that he can sort of join the others, at least initially, but ultimately is there to try and take them off Earth, as we see later on. Yeah. But it was just, I liked that. I thought it was real dynamic. All the Vulcan and the Confederation ships firing away, and again, even just him dealing with one of his, I guess, sub commanders. He kind of went through it quite well, even though he was still trying to process where he was. Yep. So I really like this introduction of Colonel Rios in this new reality. Effectively,
he does something similar to what Annika did as well, didn't he? He says to the sub commander, what was my plan? She's like, "Oh, you distract them, and then we'll send wave after wave to kill all of the Vulcans," kind of thing. So it does feel like the Vulcans are a resistance here as well. It doesn't feel like Vulcans as powerful as we would see in the Federation, probably because of what the Confederation have done to them as well.
Yeah, which is take out their power, which is the Science Academy. Exactly. It's the logical, grounded center of knowledge and rationale, I guess.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, it's interesting seeing that battle. And again, Vulcans were the first to make contact with humans. So they're the closest in alien species to humans, whereas here they're on opposite sides on a war. So, that's another great change for this world. So what the heck happened in 2024 to cause this change that has completely changed what the Federation is? It'd be really interesting to find that out in the future.
COVID-24.
Well, absolutely. Do you know, I did that weird thing. I know we'll talk about that bit a little bit later, but I did that weird thing when I watched the episode because in Star Trek in general, when they go back to the past, they pick out a date and they go, this is the thing that needs to be changed to be fixed, or in loads of shows and movies and stuff. And we're going back to 2024, and I was like, what happened in 2024 that could have caused this? I was like, oh no, that's in 2 years' time. So I don't know what happened.
There's certainly the US presidential elections in 2024. So it could be, because
are they going to make a big statement about what might happen in the next presidential elections?
Oh is that what imagine they do that?
Well, they have always been quite a politically charged show. So, but not usually as on the nose as specifically calling that out. So,
they don't put politics in sci-fi. Never.
Never.
There's no such thing.
No, not at all.
No, there's no commentary on slavery or race or equity. Yeah. Never take your politics out of my shows.
Never happened. But yeah, it's interesting that that Rios is recalled to Earth and is sitting there waiting to extract the team. I like that he has full control of the ship, even though he's in another universe. He knows how to use it instantly. I thought that was a nice little joke from him, where he's like, I guess some things are still the same.
Yeah.
So good one there. My medium moment for the episode, again, another one of the characters that have been brought across by Q into this universe, Dr. Juratti. I just really like Dr. Juratti this season. I like her difference to season one. In season one, she had this real mission. She had been betrayed by her boyfriend, who'd gone out into the galaxy, and she was on a mission to help everybody because she was the only one that knew everything. Now she seems really lost, and I like that they're referencing that from the moment she's on screen here, where she goes, oh, okay, Annika, you came over into this galaxy and became president. I'm pretty much the same, just slightly better at developing computer companions for myself. That's it. I'm exactly the same. I'm lost. I'm lonely. I have nobody else to depend on. I thought that was a great joke. Also an excellent gag where Annika tries to do the same thing she did, but Rios tries to be really covert about the fact that there's a connection between the two of them. And she goes, Juratti, the last time I saw you, you were gazing at the stars. And she goes, oh yes, aboard the Stargazer. I mean, I'm a stargazer. So, completely losing the thread of trying to be surreptitious about this. And then, calls her Seven and comes up with a great nickname for Annika, which is Annika Seven Shots.
Yeah.
Hansen. Fantastic.
I do love how we get, Patton Oswalt.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Once again, Patton Oswalt, actually one of the main sci-fi kind of people that is across every major sci-fi universe and franchise. He has done it all. He's in DC, he's in Marvel, he's in Star Trek. Apparently he's been in Star Wars as within one of the newer shows. Like, you name it, this man is in the franchise.
I feel like he spent the last 2.5 years of the pandemic sitting in his wardrobe in his bedroom recording voiceovers for every single show out there. It feels like he turned everything on and he's doing a voiceover. He even got the entire series of first season of MODOK, where he started as MODOK. So, for Marvel. So he's had quite a lot of voice work over the last couple of years. But always fun to hear his voice in there.
Yes, absolutely loved it. One thing I just quickly note on this with Juratti, which is, I think we were right. There is no Soji. Like, Soji was not on the Stargazer.
Yeah.
Soji, she may be in the show, but I don't think she is a main character in this season.
It is really interesting to note. Remember the battle at the end of episode 1, multiple ships in the area. We had Rafi and Elnor on a completely different ship to all of the rest of the characters. But the crew that we have here is everyone from the La Sirena. All of Picard's closest people that are with him. There's no captain of one of the other ships that's been brought back to this time. So I know that's really convenient for the TV show writers. I get that, but there has to be an actual reason as well why Q only took these 6-7 people from Picard's time. There has to be a reason why he's surrounding just these people together. Of course, that's just the writing of the show, but there's probably a couple of thousand people that were at that battle and weren't taken over by Q.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, Q in that moment when Picard is asking, what about the crew of the Stargazer? He says, isn't that quaint? So Q doesn't really care. So I guess all those ships and the people aboard them are in this reality because it's the same reality.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So it's just we're not going to focus on them. I think it's just that's the nature of it.
Maybe. Yeah.
But technically, this isn't a different universe. It's not a different timeline, a branch timeline. It is the timeline. It's just different because of a change in direction.
Yeah. I also feel if there was anybody other than the main crew that's popped over here, they're probably a red shirt who's going to die in the next episode. So,
and I think the important other side of it is that we do see that there is a Dr. Alton Sung as well in this world, because we see the big kind of light statue as you go into San Francisco to the Confederation headquarters. So he is in this reality as well.
Absolutely.
And he is the creator of the synths. So it could be that we come across Soji at some point through the next series of episodes.
That's true. And Alton Sung, you hear him say the same speech as Picard. You hear him say, a safe galaxy is a human galaxy. And that's done by Brent Spiner as well, who played the role of Alton Sung at the end of last season. So, entirely possible that Soji could be the big bad somewhere else.
She could be another resistance element here. True. Because the synths here are in the same situation as the Romulan slaves in Chateau Picard. They are there to serve the human masters, ultimately. So poor Harvey, the valet. At Chateau Picard.
Well, absolutely.
But I do like the way his eyes light up as he sort of accesses the data logs. But anyway, that's just a little point.
Absolutely. My medium point was just Juratti in the episode and her version of the character. Again, I like how she's being played this season. Like she's a little bit of comic relief as well. You know, the fact that she has a fight with Rios on the phone while trying to resolve their communications issue, I think was quite fun as well. Rios going, "Oh, we're going to do this now," while there's this big moment going on, and she's saying, "Well, you know, I can't hang up the phone on you." Basically, in anger, we might as well have this conversation now. I love that when she's taking the Borg Queen out of isolation, she's going, I guess I know how to do this. I'll press this button here, this. Oh, okay, it works. Brilliant. You know, but she's talking to herself the whole time as well. So, I really like how she's being played in this season. So that's my Omega directive for the episode.
Brilliant. Should we move on to our Prime directive?
Yes, let's.
We must face the ramifications of the Prime directive.
Who wants to kick us off with their Prime directive, the main point?
I think I will, because I think it sets up for everyone else's pretty much. And it is the big element here. My big moment, my Prime directive is my enemy's enemy is my friend, as Picard needs the Borg Queen for a bit of timey-wimey stuff. But certainly, I think what's really great about this is that there's that sympathy for the Borg, but she is about to be eradicated, and she is the last of her kind. And the necessity of Picard and the rest of the group in needing to change and correct this disruption because of how sort of nightmarish it is for them, how authoritarian it is, and it's the conjunction of Picard being the one to administer the eradication on the very last Borg, one of humanity's greatest enemies, but then needing the Borg Queen because of her connection with temporal and spatial, I guess, mechanics, so that they can ultimately use her to go back to the past and to correct. And I really like this because there's an element of, oh no, this is the last Borg Queen. Don't get rid of the Borg, because they're great. You know, they're always the great foil, for the Federation, but we're not there. And so even though they need them, you still don't trust her. I mean, the actor playing the Borg Queen is just really good. You know, just the eyes moving. It's like you're saying, she calls out Juratti not really being very different from, her counterparts.
Yes.
Which was really interesting.
Absolutely. And a big point about the Borg Queen here. So she's not the Borg Queen that we saw in the first episode. This is the Borg Queen of this universe,
yes.
But she has got a connection to all Borg Queens within the vicinity, is the way that I think Juratti describes it. So effectively, because this timeline has only had one change in it and has now become a different timeline, it's very closely associated with our universe, or the regular universe that we were in for the first episode of Star Trek. So she has a connection to the Borg Queen that was aboard the Stargazer in episode 1. So but she's not the same character. She hasn't been through that universe, but she has got the connection to her. So I think that's quite an interesting touch.
Yeah.
They can, through temporal anomaly or temporal space, they can feel and understand that there is other Borg Queens and other. Yeah, it was interesting to say that. It does kind of make them slightly OP, but in this case, not really, because she's the last Borg.
Yes. I do like as well, you know, in trying to decide what they can do to rectify this situation, to, you know, as Picard mentions about Q when they're all down in Juratti's lab, and they ask, I think it's Rafi says, how do we get Mr. Alphabet to change time? And it is, you know, their only option is to enlist the Borg Queen to do her thing, so that, you know, they can go back in time. I do like the reference. The Enterprise under Captain Kirk did this a bunch of times, you know. I really like that kind of nod, because, you know, I think, as you mentioned off the bat, Chris, you know, time travel in Star Trek is a big thing.
Yep.
It's used quite widely. It's not seen as a big event in some respects, I think. It feels much more embedded as something that you can do through wormholes and so on and so forth. That I think it's really interesting that this is, you know, the quick fix, because it's not about sort of bolstering the resistance or trying to provide a counterpoint to the Confederation. It's like, we need to go back to the point identified by the Borg Queen, which is in 2024 on Earth in Los Angeles, and that there is someone there to help, someone known as the Watcher. So I just really liked all of this interaction, because at the heart of it, there's that tension of it being Borg. And I think that's the great thing about this race, is there's an inherent tension because of how focused, how uncompromising they are as a species, and the threat that they can provide. And yet they need her help. And also then just that race against time as they're trying to get the transporters to work so they can transport to Rios's ship. It is just really good. I like how Picard is, you know, riling up the crowd, and then he's like, come on, I need to transport. And it's like, then the crowd are like, what's going on here? You know, I thought that was, okay, pull the trigger.
It's like that really sad fading rock star who wants the applause before they play the first note of their song, because they only have one song to play, you know. It's like that. And it was a really interesting touch of the writing. You mentioned that there's a little bit of sympathy for the Borg Queen being the last of her race, but it's also written into it here that Annika has a massive problem with the Borg Queen here. She's looking at her going, how does it feel? I know how it feels because that's what happened to me. That's what you did to me when I was a child. You took everything I knew. And it's almost like she's slipping into that president role, the person that would have created Eradication Day for the Borg specifically, because She doesn't want them to exist.
Yeah.
She doesn't want them to have existed when they did what they did to her, which I think was a good point.
Exactly. And I think it's a great sequence. It is that tension between humanity and the Borg. It is also, the suspension of this race against time to get out of the situation that they're in and to prevent the eradication of the last Borg Queen.
Yeah.
I think the other side of it is, in terms of her connections, she does recognize Picard as Locutus as well, which is really good. I love it whenever they call that out. To me, that they always should do that. So for me, that was like tick. And the Borg Queen also calls out Seven as the 7 of 9 tertiary adjunct to Unimatrix 01.
That's right, her full name.
Which is her full name.
Yeah.
So thank goodness they abbreviated it to 7 of 9 because, yeah.
Well, I presume if she ever gets married to Rafi in the show, that will be what will be called out at the ceremony as her full name, right?
I guess so.
7 of 9.
Will Rafi take 01 as her surname?
No, it has to be the full name. Oh, maybe, maybe.
No, but what's the? Well, that's true. But I was just wondering, in terms of that long name, which part of it is actually the forename and which part of it is the surname?
Well, I guess if 7 is the shortened name that her friends have for her, I guess that it would be Rafi Unimatrix 01. I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
Or Rafi tertiary adjunct to Unimatrix 01. Maybe that's it. We may find out in the next season if Rafi's going to put up with her to get married to her in the next season. Maybe that's it.
But that's my big moment. Chris, what is your prime directive?
Yeah, so for me, it's really, let's go back in time, back to the future, back to the past to save the future. I'm here for it. This is something, it's just, this storyline has to be done well. We're on a razor's edge because this story has been told hundreds of times. They've changed something in the past. The bad guys have changed something in the past, which has changed the present. So now we need to go back to the past to save the future. And I'm hoping it's different enough. Because we have seen this. And this was, I slightly concerned when they started going down this route. I'm like, Star Trek 4, the motion picture for like the film, had this storyline where they, in the 80s, they went back to the 80s to save the future. Like, we've seen this. It's been done. And like, we're literally told we're going into 2024. And I'm like, okay, good for budget, because you don't need to change many sets, because it's just outside.
But it's 2 years away, Chris. It's not going back to 2019. It's going to a future that we don't know at the moment as well. I suppose the reason why in Star Trek it feels like time travel is so big to the show is because, look, I'll say it. I'm a Star Trek fan. I can say this. Star Trek is a niche property. It's liked by people who like Star Trek, and people know about it. But when it breaks out of that niche, when it makes tons of money and breaks it into the consciousness, I would say arguably the two biggest movies of Star Trek's entire film series are Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, where they have time travel, and Star Trek First Contact, where they travel back in time to change time before the Borg take over the planet, effectively, and before the Borg stop First Contact from happening. So the two big movies, the big ones that have broken out, are time travel movies, whereas all the rest of them don't feature time travel. So there was time travel in the original Star Trek series. That's definitely the time when they used it to save budget, when they basically just walked off the sets and went out into 60s US, so that they didn't have to have a big budget episode. But it does form definitely a part of Star Trek. But I'm a big fan of time travel. You know, hell, we grew up in the 80s. How many 80s movies had that as their premise?
Exactly.
You know, with Back to the Future and into Bill and Ted movies. You know, all of those movies have this idea of go back in time. Terminator, absolutely.
Into the 90s with Time Cop.
Yeah. Oh, I love that film.
Okay. Wow. Two. I like even more than I like that film for Time Cop as a surprise there. But yes, it does form a big part of sci-fi is the idea of time travel. So in that concept, I always love the concept of something happened on one night which changed the future forever, which is very much the Back to the Future concept.
Yes.
That's the whole idea of that. Something happened on this night, you need to go back and fix it, and then make your way back to our time, and everything hopefully will be back to normal.
Future.
So I'm really excited about this, but as I said, the reason why I think it feels more synonymous with Star Trek, who's explored so many different types of sci-fi as well over all the show that it's done. It feels more synonymous because the two big breakouts they've had in movies have been about time travel.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's a potentially bad thing. I'm not hanging up the coat right now.
You better not, Chris. We've got like 8 more episodes to watch and podcast about.
And I suppose, slight spoilers, there is time travel elements in Star Trek Discovery.
Yes.
And that was done amazingly. Like, to the point where I was like, this is fantastic. So there is huge scope for this to be an amazing storyline.
Yeah.
There is also huge chasms where they can trip up.
Yes,
and
but
just
let's go
fall into the
positive,
very
Chris.
trope. No, and I'm going to be 100% positive.
Yeah.
It was just, and like I said, like, I don't know, spoilers for when we do the wrap up. I enjoyed this episode. This episode was fantastic. As a whole, I'm just very wary of, we've seen this storyline across Star Trek and across other properties, and I'm like, you run a risk of.
But there's only so many storylines.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, you could say as a writer, everything boils down to tragedy, comedy,
exactly.
Exactly,
And time travel.
Yes, exactly, time travel.
The one Shakespeare didn't get.
Well, who knows?
Or
Maybe
maybe
Macbeth or Othello is actually time travel.
There's a great phrase that Helen O'Hara uses on the Empire podcast whenever they go down this path of, we've seen a trailer, the movie could be crap. She uses this great phrase, which is, it's always Christmas Eve. So think about it like that, Chris. Tomorrow's Christmas Day. We have an idea of where they're going with the show, and let's hope it's the best possible way that they can go with the show. How about that?
Oh, no, sorry, again. it's more, I am very, like I said, I'm here for this.
Yep.
I'm here for this journey. I am just wary. And no, not wary. That's not even right. It's just like, I was like, oh, okay, you're doing that.
Uh-huh.
Like, we've seen that. I think we've seen that. I could be wrong.
Exactly.
And that's why I'm here, and I'm going to continue this journey into episode 3, 4, 5, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
It was just, as they were saying this, I was like, oh, okay, right. What's the difference? And I suppose that's the bit that I would have expected maybe in this part, where they would have announced it's like, hey, we're doing this, we've got to go back in time. But this is why it's different. They just didn't get that difference. Like, you can, like, just that makes it unique.
I think the context that it makes it different is the Q element, and it's to do as to why he's doing this.
Yeah.
Because, again, it is whether Picard ultimately understands and recognizes what Q is saying. And he has to some extent with saying, that you're not well. He's recognized that there is something different, but he is still talking about Q giving him tests, even in Juratti's lab. That's what he explains to the rest of his crew about who Q is as an entity, and he sets these tests to complete, to make sure that humanity is saved or whatever. Whereas, as you say, in that opening part of the episode, Q is very much saying, this is the same day and the same time, but it is a different harvest because of one point. Whether it is that, as I was saying before, whether it's Picard or someone related to Picard that has made that change, or it's a more detached change that happens, and then as a result, this is where we have, ruthless General Picard doing his conquests and bloodshed across the galaxy. Yeah. But I think that's the different in context, and I think also it's just time travel is so embedded, I feel, in Star Trek, because ultimately it is getting it from the concept of relativity. They do ultimately try and use the recent science and what it's saying to inform them, and this idea of wormholes and being able to move you back through time, you know, that it is conceptually possible. So it's taking it forward and saying, yes, it is conceptually possible. It's still very difficult to do, and that's why we need to enlist someone like the Borg Queen.
Yeah, and that's a reference to Star Trek 4. That's how they went back to the past, was Spock calculated it, so they go around the sun.
Slingshot.
Slingshots them. So again, like the joke there, where it's like they had Spock. Oh, but we have her, the Borg Queen.
Yeah.
So,
That was cool. I really enjoyed that. It was like, well, how are we going to, well, the Enterprise did it back in the day, and they did it, like, I was like, that was cool. Like, they pulled out and called out all these bits. But look, I suppose that was just my bit, which is, we've seen this. I wonder how they're going to do it.
And why it's different is because, effectively, both of Picard's biggest nemeses, in Q and the Borg Queen, are now effectively kind of helping them, or at least involved, let's say.
Yes.
So Q may be the one that's showing them how it's all different and punishing them, and the Borg Queen is helping them out. So it's quite interesting to have both of them involved in this time travel story. Good stuff. Nice. For my prime directive, my big point about the episode is just the other moment that we haven't talked about is just the arrival of Rafi and Elnor and their story within the episode, because I think there's quite a lot laid out here in the show. I mentioned it a little bit in the first episode about their relationship now being much more mother and son, but you can definitely tell it here. I love Elnor. He has such a good relationship with Rafi.
It's very cute.
It's really cute, where he's kind of calling out. That's a really good tactical concept they have there, Rafi. She's like, thank you. Great idea. But there is an interesting story going on. You sort of mentioned that the situation going on in Okinawa, where the Vulcan Defense Force is attacking the city and incorporates other members of the Romulans, like Elnor here with his partner that's running with him at the time. But really interestingly, they lay out quite a lot of the story of what's going on in this universe. What they're doing as terrorists in the city is blowing up 5 skyscrapers, which represent the 5 planets that have been destroyed by the Confederation or have been taken over by the Confederation. So they mentioned that there was that Cardassia's gone, Andoria's gone, Vulcan's gone, Kronos, which is the Klingon homeworld, is gone, and Romulus. All of those planets are gone. So that's why they've blown up the 5 of them. Just after she explains that, unfortunately, she's also taken out. But Elnor is saved by Rafi. So Rafi very quickly slots into this. I wonder has Rafi been in a parallel universe before? Because she very quickly slots into her role as the chief of security, taking control, not confused at all about the situation. It's like, okay, I've got Elnor. We need to take him back to headquarters and move along.
Yeah, I think she gets the situation really quickly, and I guess that's her tactical nature of her role. So she processes it really quickly. So I love that. I really like that she processes it. I mean, she takes out 4 of the other Confederation soldiers because they're about to shoot to kill, ultimately shoot on spot. So, but then she's, quick-witted and says, I need this Romulan captured. Yeah. And again, I find that with, Picard as well, that's really very quick on the mark, and that's kind of what I guess you would expect from being tactical and a strategist as a captain of a starship.
Absolutely.
Or as their lead security.
Exactly. And Rafi was his number 1 for a number of years. I think it's about 8 years, wasn't it? We found out in season 1. So they'd worked together a very long time. So she should be a person that can think on her feet really quickly. So I like that. Also some fun moments with Elnor. One of my favorite lines from him is when Picard is explaining the whole situation with Q, and he goes, "Oh, I know that name. That was in your autobiography, which I read." Where he's kind of hero worshipping Picard. I thought that was that was good fun.
That was really good.
And then I thought a fantastic fight with Elnor and the security team when Rafi sent off to allow them to break the shields to get the transporters working, take them all out. And Rafi's effectively sends Elnor in to be kicked around by the security team, as a Romulan, and they're punishing him because of the hatred of Romulans of the Confederation. But he takes it all, but the minute that Rafi says, "They're yours now, Elnor," we get our Elnor back as he takes out the security team left, right, and center and kills them all.
Yeah, well. Loved it. Loved this action.
Like slices a guy's throat.
Yeah. Goes,
like, I was, and goes, what? You said I could. Very much is like...
Picard told me to improvise.
He goes full on Quat Malot, I guess.
He certainly does.
But I thought this was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, really good. And unfortunately, I guess the episode ends with them all being transported out onto the La Sirena, and Elnor takes the brunt of the shot from President Annika's husband, who shoots immediately when he comes on board, and Elnor drops to the ground. So, will we see, like with the death of Hugh in season 1, the innocent character taken out?
I hope not.
At the start of episode 3, I guess.
I really hope not. I hope he survives for sure. I really like Elnor.
I really do.
But he's injured. He is shot, but it seems like it's in the chest, which is pretty dangerous for his health,
Absolutely.
I guess. But he is alive, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, agreed. I really enjoyed these two characters. I especially just like Elnor.
Mm-hmm.
And that fight was just kind of visceral.
Yeah.
Because it was just you were like, oh, okay, they're being a bit more, to that point, up until that point, I should say, I was like, oh, they're being a bit more, I want to say cable TV, where it's a bit more kind of reserved.
Okay.
It just, like, it didn't look like the punches were being as impactful, like and then he's just like goes full, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. He just basically, he just cuts everything down. Mm-hmm. And it's with ease. And you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right. They're very much planting their flag again in, this is a older, more mature Star Trek again, in that, like, what we got similar to last season, which was, it was like, okay, here's your Star Trek. Okay, the Star Trek has evolved. Mm-hmm. This is your daddy's Star Trek kind of thing.
Absolutely. Like, the target audience for this is people that would have watched The Next Generation when it came out first, and have now grown and evolved with it effectively. Yes. So,
and like violence.
But it is great to see, at least at that moment, with Elnor, it is great to see that he still has all of those skills, because you start to feel a little bit sorry for him, you know, that the moments with Rafi all the way up to them, whenever she's interacting with anybody, did you notice that she effectively shuts him down from speaking? Because, if he speaks, he's going to have to tell the entire truth, the absolute candor. It's part of his entire personality. So if anybody asks him who he is, he'll tell them exactly who he is, that he has no idea why he's here, and they will either arrest him or kill him. So, all the way through, Rafi's been shutting him down and stopping him talking in case he gets them into trouble. But here he's thrown to the floor before he turns on them. He's thrown to the floor and kicked around by the security team. So I was feeling very sorry for him. And then at the end, getting shot as the first target of the arriving security team. Before our cliffhanger of the week, where I guess the plan has been stopped because everybody's gotten out, everybody's aboard La Sirena, the Borg Queen is being hooked up to the ship.
Well, that's it. The only thing is, the one person who's not at the end of the first husband's phaser and his two security team is Dr. Juratti and the Borg Queen. So whether something to save them could come from that direction, who knows?
The other Rioses, the holographic Rioses, we haven't seen them turned on in this universe.
Yeah, they may not exist in this universe.
Yeah, they may. Yeah. I think that's good. But like the Borg Queen turns them on, that's her.
Yeah, so there could be some ways out, I guess.
Very quickly, the Elnor's girlfriend. Can you imagine being the actress who got that part?
Oh, look.
It's just like, oh my god, I've got like Elnor's love interest. Uh-huh. Oh my god, this is going to be fantastic.
Nope.
That's it. You're done.
Nope.
Sorry. Yeah.
Love it.
It was just like, I saw that and I was like, oh, poor actress.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
We hadn't seen her before. She wasn't in the first season as like someone he was running with. I didn't see her. I don't recognize her. So I was just like, I don't think so.
No, Elnor was kind of on his own with the Quat Malot in training. So unless she was another member of the Quat Malot, but they were all dressed in their full garb. Their full outfits.
Yes.
So we didn't see any of them.
Yes, the bitter sting of a phaser, I guess. But that's the Prime directives. Mm-hmm. Anything else? Any Easter eggs or any other points that you briefly want to mention?
Yeah, got two quick ones. One was why do they have to tease us with this? There's a moment where, Annika is about to call out to, Rios to, reacquaint herself. And the recommended Starfleet officer that she's told to reach out to is General Sisko. But no, she goes, no, I don't want to talk to him. I want to talk to Rios. Now, I love Cristobal Rios. He's a great character, but I would like to have seen Sisko back in
that
Star
would have been
Trek
good. But he's not Starfleet, it's Confederation.
It is the Confederation.
It would be
right.
evil Sisko, which we have seen.
We have, yes.
Which would have been brilliant.
Yeah,
absolutely.
As I said, 3 or 4 episodes of the Mirror Universe on DS9, so I think we've definitely seen a bit of that version of Sisko.
Yeah, I do think we'll get a few cameos. We got cameos in season 1. Mm-hmm. I think we'll get cameos in season 2.
Yes, I think so.
And they now that they name dropped it, I'm hoping
will we
get one?
Yeah,
because I'm also assuming the Ferengi skull we saw at the beginning could be Quark.
It could be, yes. It could be poor Quark.
Yeah.
So effectively he went to DS9, killed Gul Dukat, took out Quark, and then left. Is what happened with General Picard.
Yeah, mine is, we know, Picard's favourite drink is an Earl Grey hot. Mm-hmm. And here we have Harvey, his valet, bringing him his morning drink, which is a Colombian roast black, which Picard obviously really doesn't like coffee. And so it's, a nice little, moment here because we did have Earl Grey cold, in the last episode, Laris, giving him, Picard his cold, cup of Earl Grey because he's been faffing around for so long.
Exactly. You say that Picard doesn't like it. His exact response is, this truly is the circle that Dante forgot. So another circle of hell. And we do again know as Star Trek fans, who is it that drinks black coffee? It is Captain Janeway's favorite drink. So I don't think Janeway and Picard would have breakfast together if that's his reaction to a cup of coffee.
Well, hopefully they get on, and that isn't a sticking point in their relationship.
Yeah. For me, this actually makes Picard. I like Picard more. I think I could sit down with Picard and have a coffee. This Picard, I don't know about the Earl Grey. I never I'm not a tea man. Yeah. I'm a coffee man. Colombian roast dark. Oh yeah.
He's not forcing anyone to also have Earl Grey hot. It's just so you could still have your Colombian roast, for sure.
Well, we don't know that. There could be another universe where there is a dictator called Picard who the directive that goes out across the Confederation
has outlawed all other hot beverages.
You know what?
Earl Grey hot.
You know what? I do think General Jean-Luc Picard would be the kind of person that would only make people drink coffee in his household. Did you see? I know he has slaves of the Romulans in the house, but did you see the indication that they're slaves and not general workers? As he hasn't allowed them to get their traditional Romulan haircut. So all of them have messy hair in the house. So
and they look so much better.
That's how horrible he is.
Rather than the kind of bold
cut.
There you go. That's kind of the notes for the episode. I'm sure there would be loads more if we had time to be able to go through that room, particularly the trophy room in Picard's house. I'd say there'd be loads more from there as well. But some really interesting touches in this episode, and hopefully we'll see more in 2024.
Definitely,
if they get to leave, of course.
Of course.
But let us get to the 10 Forward pub quiz, fellow quizzers and fellow Trekkies, because yes, I guess you can start off with a Colombian roast black, maybe with a bit of Irish whiskey in there. So it's an Irish coffee for this week's quiz question.
Irish Colombian coffee, or maybe 9 shots before you start.
Or 9 shots, yes. We could, 7 shots.
7 shots, not 7 of 9 shots.
9 shots would be, well, you'll be slurring your answer to the pub quiz questions if you have 9 shots, but 7 shots as well. Yes, you could have a quick 7 shots just to limber yourself up.
Wow.
And get the brain going.
It might make you quite loose. Will you remember what the answer to the question is? John, do you want to give them the question for this week's pub quiz?
What is the name of Dr. Juratti's virtual companion cat?
Very close to spoiling this earlier on when you said that Patton Oswalt was the voice of the virtual companion cat.
For sure.
Not going to spoil it. John, do you want to give the question one more time?
Yeah. What is the name of Dr. Juratti's virtual companion cat. Please send in your answers to feedback at TV Podcast Industries. Just highlight that it is for the pub quiz and which question. You can send them in one by one, or you could just batch send them all in once we've asked all the questions towards our final episode of this season of Picard.
Absolutely. So, send them in to feedback at tvpodcastindustries.com. The same place where you can send any feedback for Star Trek Picard. You can email us to that address with any thoughts. And at the end of the season, we will pick out a winner of some Star Trek Picard goodies.
Yes. And on feedback, you can also join us over on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries. Again, we are recording ahead of time, so please send in your feedback, thoughts, theories, Easter eggs, you name it, to the Facebook group or through email. Also, if you want to hear your voice on the podcast, you can record a clip of yourself on your phone and email it to us, or go over to our website at tvpodcastindustries.com and record up to 90 seconds of your thoughts. Just go to the right-hand tab of the website.
Absolutely. Let's pop on over to some feedback on last week's episode. Thanks, Derek, for the past. Yes, to feedback for episode 1 of Star Trek Picard, the Stargazer. I'm here on my own. Chris and John aren't here for this section of the podcast, but I did want to hear your thoughts and wanted to talk about your thoughts on the episode from last week. First up, over in our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries, we have Victor Von Doom, who says, "What is up with the opening song in episode 1? Did the Rolling Stones want too much for their version?" That's an interesting one, Victor. Yeah, the song Time Is On My Side. Yeah, a very well-known Rolling Stones song. But this version that's in the episode is from Irma Thomas and was released a couple of years before the Rolling Stones cover version of the song. I don't know whether Irma Thomas's was the original, because I think it was written a couple of years before that as well. But it's an interesting, different version of it, I thought, and worked quite well for Laris and for Picard to be listening to it in the chateau as everything is wrapping up for the season again. I thought that was an interesting start for it. Thanks, Victor. Also over on Facebook, Heather Wallace says, "This was such a great treat on a difficult day, getting to see the first episode and then listening to your podcast. Great insights as always, gentlemen, and thank you for pointing out the things I'd missed, like the Emmet holograms being merged. By the end scene, I had yesterday's Enterprise vibes from the militaristic overtones of Picard's uniform, badge, and painting. Guinan was the one who sensed things were wrong in that timeline, so will she have similar advice now? So good to have John Delancey back as Q. He seems much more threatening now that he's older. It suits him. Interesting exploration of Picard's romantic life. It's not been officially confirmed if he and Dr. Crusher married and then divorced. The future from All Good Things, where that happened, was changed by the end of that episode. He had a serious relationship with a member of the crew, Nella Darren, in the episode Lessons, but it ended because he couldn't be objective about putting her in danger and it was limiting her career. About 10 years ago, I had the great pleasure of having dinner with the actress who played that role, Wendy Hughes. She had a successful career in Australia and the UK and said that her role in Star Trek The Next Generation was one of her favourite parts because she was the one who got Jean-Luc Picard to commit, even briefly. She enjoyed the kissing scenes of Patrick Stewart too, and who can blame her?" Absolutely, Heather. That's really, really interesting insight. I think we did talk about why they didn't mention Beverly Crusher, and the fact that they'd been married and divorced. There was the tie-in novel, I think, just before the first season of Star Trek Picard was released, and there is a mention of Beverly Crusher in there, but she's only mentioned in passing, nothing about their actual relationship or whether it's been confirmed or not. So, a really interesting thought there about Nella Darren, who was included in one episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. So that's a really interesting story. Thanks for that. So he has had loves in the past, but never a serious love that he could pursue forever, I suppose is the point. So very interesting. Thanks so much, Heather. I hope you're enjoying the podcast as well, and I hope you enjoyed episode 2. We also got some thoughts in from Dr. Bob Phillips, who says, "Wonderful podcast as always. Well, there's nothing like an opening on a cliffhanger at the end of the hero existence. The quiet declaration of love and the inability of Picard to accept it was utterly heartbreaking and just perfectly in line with Picard of previous years. Enjoying the openings, mostly exploring the failings of the intimate relationships of our key company. Might be a bit heavy-handed with the barkeep and would be great in Guinan's return, but it feels like season 2 will be exploring trust and connection, love in all its ways. Hawking radiation. Have we heard that before? I'm not sure if we've heard that before, Dr. Bob. That's interesting. Yeah, I wonder if it's the first time mentioning or have we had that in the show before? Fellow Trekkiers and Trekkers, let us know if that's been mentioned before in the show. Dr. Bob says, best Juratti line has to be, the fabric of space-time rending does not shout stability. Very good, very good. Dr. Bob says, the new Borg ship is beautiful, but the Borg Queen looking like Doctor Who flux passenger before they put their makeup on is a bit odd. And the Q getting older switch was superb. I also wanted a bit more from this episode, but we'll have to wait patiently. I wonder if the alternate timeline is going to be one where the car did manage to get the evacuation of Romulus to happen, but with lots of negativity flowing out of it. I think Harvey the android mentioned something about transportation logs. Ooh, interesting thoughts, Dr. Bob. I know a lot of your questions there will have been answered in this episode. They're not slowing down on giving answers to the kind of questions we have, very much kicking off this episode. So, yeah, this Picard is a very different Picard, and I don't think the evacuation of Romulus was happening in this episode. It looks like it may have been the execution of everybody on Romulus. And finally on Facebook, Dan Lee says that Picard over the comm gave me goosebumps. Excellent first episode. Can't fault it. Glad you enjoyed it as much as we did, Dan. I hope you enjoyed episode 2 as well. Victor Sellish sent us an email into feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. He says, greetings, Trekkies. I enjoyed the new season opening. I might like working at Chateau Picard. Pinot Noir is one of my faves. Laris looks younger than season 1. I think JL should have acted on her advances, but where would the series go? Sitcom? Probably not. Agnes a drunk? I can't get behind that. Maybe the breakup with Rios is the cause. Seven should take better care of La Serena. I guess this is Q's way of making Picard cure everything up to the last Borg engagement. I think something in his childhood may have a bearing on this season. The many references to a journey inward are very interesting, and I hope to see more. Nice to chat with you all again. Looking forward to more. Peace and love, Victor Von Doom. Thanks, Victor. Yeah, I guess the son at Chateau Picard seems to have de-aged Laris a bit. She does look younger this season as well. But yeah, I think the entire season is going to explore that concept of the relationship at least. As we can see in episode 2, Laris isn't here for this episode. So perhaps he'll be coming back and meeting her towards the end of the season. As for Agnes, I think she kind of explains how badly her life seems to have gone, especially in relationships. So I think she's just having a few too many drinks at the bar. I'm not too sure whether she's a drunk. Thanks so much, Victor. Hopefully hear from you again after this episode. And we have one final piece of feedback in our feedback section. Matt Murdoch is back with his thoughts on the newly restructured Picard theme tune from composer Jeff Russo. Take it away, Matt.
Hello, Derek, John, and Chris. Matt here. First of all, thanks to you guys for continuing to cover Picard. As you guys know, I do podcasts too, but I could never cover the Star Trek franchise. It's something that is a little bit too personal for me. But I really enjoyed your review of the premiere episode. And of course, you know that the thing that stuck out to me was the fact that Jeff Russo, who's basically composing, I guess, for just about the entirety of the Star Trek franchise on Paramount Plus or Amazon or however you're getting it, how he changed up the theme. The main motifs are still there. The melody is still there. But I think, as you guys pointed out in your excellent podcast covering the premiere, everything was a lot darker. And I thought I'd take a minute to explain how that was achieved. First off, let's just take a look at what those two main kind of motifs or melodies in the theme itself are that is in common between season 1 and season 2. First, you have this, what I just call a motif, a little snippet of music that gets repeated throughout the course of the theme. This. And then you have a prominent kind of melody as well, like this. But there are, of course, remarkable differences in the way that these little pieces of music are harmonized, the rhythm of the accompaniment, and the timbres, the instruments that are used. For instance, in season 1, that first motif that I played is harmonized quite simply between just 2 chords, and it's played with a flute-like sound. And it gives us this sense of sweetness, or at most a bitter sweetness. Yet at the beginning of season 2, we hear that same motive being harmonized with much more harsh instrumentation like brass. There is a rhythm that is going underneath it as well that is subdividing things twice as fast as what I just played, as opposed to this. You're going to get this. Now, the tempos are different, so it doesn't quite feel like the second one is twice as fast as the first. But there are twice as many subdivisions. And anytime you increase the number of notes in between beats, I can guarantee you increase the heart rate of the person listening to it. And of course, the most striking thing about what Russo did with this motif is the harmonization. When you couple it with that rhythm, it becomes huge, it becomes epic, and it becomes very dissonant and very tense as opposed to kind of harmonically beautiful. Now it becomes something that is very dangerous. The real key is in what harmonies are used. Specifically in that string line that moves, a dominant harmony is implied. You don't need to know that term, but what a dominant harmony does is it feels like it needs to move somewhere. Yet he makes this the center of the key to where it can't really move anywhere. And what creates the tension is the two top notes. The bottom note makes us feel grounded, but the other two notes, the way they interact together, makes us feel uncomfortable. These two notes. That's called a tritone. And while the name isn't important, what you need to know is that within any octave of notes, there are 12 semitones. And those two particular notes are exactly 6 apart. One of the things that Pythagoras found, that same guy who made up rules about triangles, also applied mathematics to music back then. He discovered that we don't like symmetry in our harmony. If you divide our harmony by 2 or by 4, all of a sudden we are going crazy. We don't like it. It feels like it needs to resolve somewhere. And the fact that Russo grounds this as the home key means there's no resolution, hence tension. And of course, there's all kinds of harmonic dissonance in this thing. He's playing chords that don't fit with the melody really, technically, in any kind of key. And that helps create tension as well. And whoa, wait a minute. I'm looking at the timer and I've only discussed one thing and I've already gone way over the amount of time that I usually give myself for these. So I will come back next week and discuss the other half, the main melody part and how it's different next time. Thanks for covering the show, guys. I'm really enjoying it so far. Take care.
Oh, Matt Murdoch, thank you so much for your thoughts. That's fantastic. Big round of applause on my own here, but big round of applause from me to you for that. It's really interesting. Yeah, thank you for enjoying our coverage of Star Trek Picard. I think the same reason why we've never done Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is the reason why you're not covering Star Trek. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., my favorite character is Nick Fury. It's the one show that we never covered on our podcast, even though we've been going for 8 years now as a podcast and could easily have fitted in at some point, but it's because I'm a massive fan. It's very difficult to get around your massive fandom when you're doing podcasts about shows. But we enjoyed season 1 of Picard. I had thoughts about whether to cover season 2, depending on scheduling, but I'm really glad we are 2 episodes into the show, really, really enjoying it. I hope you are too. And I love your analysis there. It's really interesting when I think back to what I said on episode 1 about the theme. The only mention I made of it really was that, it had ruined it for me because I really loved that first theme tune of the first series, but I did say, it was a theme, so of course you're going to change the motifs that are in there. You're going to change what it is for season 2, setting you up to have a different experience for the second season. And you're absolutely right. That is the intention of the tune. Jeff Russo's done exactly the right thing for it. It's just, I guess I'll go to Spotify and play the season 1 theme tune and enjoy this one connected to the themes of this darker second season. Thanks so much, Matt. And thanks so much, everybody else, for your thoughts about the show. We do want to keep hearing from you about your thoughts on Picard or any of the shows we cover. Please email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com with your thoughts. You can email us an MP3 if you want to hear your voice in the podcast, or you can pop over to our website at tvpodcastindustries.com, where you can record up to 90 seconds of your thoughts on any of the episodes, and it will automatically email it to us. You can also join us on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries. We'd love to see you over there. And now, without the use of a Borg Queen, I'll send you back into the past for John, myself, and Chris to close out the episode.
Well, fellow Trekkies, thank you so much for all your thoughts. And of course, thank you for joining us as always. We hope you stay subscribed to the podcast over at tvpodcastindustries.com. You can join us on any good or evil podcast catcher of your choice. Or should I say Starfleet or Confederation podcast catcher of your choice. Please share the podcast to share the love. Subscribe or leave a review. Any support that you do is very, very much appreciated. You can also head on over to patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries to send on some Starfleet credits for the podcast. You can also go over to buymeacoffee.com/TVPI for a one-off payment as well to support us as well. Maybe it will be a Colombian roast black for the editor.
Maybe.
I do like a nice black coffee, I must say. Well, a coffee with milk, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I'll get my own milk. We will be back next week with Star Trek Picard, Season 2, Episode 3, Assimilation. And we'd love to hear your feedback on the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, we're also covering The Boys Diabolical, which is a slightly different show with some slightly different themes. But if you're interested in that, make sure you head on over to our main channels where you can find the links galore to our musings on that on that crazy show.
Yeah,
Yes.
I know we mentioned earlier on that Star Trek Picard is definitely an adult version of Star Trek for adults. I'm going, how do you describe the boys animated show then? Who's that targeted at?
It is our mirror universe of podcasts, I guess, compared to Picard, for sure.
Yes.
And all of our Marvel shows, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is the Looney Tunes on acid.
Yes.
Essentially. Or crank. You name it. You pick your LSD drug of choice and just inject it into your Looney Tunes cartoon veins.
TV Podcast Industries does not recommend anybody inject any form of
exactly
into their veins at all.
Yes.
But thanks so much for joining us. Talk to you again next time.
Bye-bye.
Yes, thanks for joining us again, fellow Trekkies. Remember, keep watching, keep listening, and keep trekking. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.